Good day, guys. It's good to come to you all the way from South Africa in the middle of winter, where we just absolutely are struggling with flu and all other kinds of diseases. Um, Unfortunately, my voice is a bit gone due to flu, so I'm not able to project my voice as I would like. Um, Recently, Jonathan McLatchie, my friend, had a discussion in Hyde Park with Paul Williams and Mamoon. I unfortunately don't know the surname of the gentleman and a few other individuals. But in the discussion, basically there was a few things that have uh, been said, and obviously, if you look at the discussion online, you can see that there's basically certain aspects of the clip that was cut out and formulated to hyphenate or to basically indicate that Jonathan committed the abominable heresy of tritheism. I just want to say something on that. If I watched the clip and let me just say, when I watched the clip, I sort of looked at the clip and I thought to myself that Jonathan is reiterating Mansoor's premise, for clarification. That is my opinion. And let me just also say that Jonathan had a few debates in South Africa. I've heard numerous discussions and topics he had specifically on the doctrine of the Trinity. And there's no doubt in my mind that he knows exactly how to articulate and how to sort of put forth a proposition to understand the biblical doctrine of the Trinity. I think throughout the discussion, it is a very difficult environment. I think it's a very hostile environment. I'm not sure if it's really fruitful for mutual discussion. If four people absolutely just stand up and start asking you questions, not trying to stick to one specific point, it makes things very difficult. The only thing that's really a concern for me is that when I watch the clip, and I'll show this to you, is it's Mansoor that basically is the one that is insisting on the father being one third removed from God, and he keeps on asking Jonathan for that. And let me just say, in fact, the whole point I think that Mansoor is trying to sort of to make is that if you look at the biblical doctrine of the Trinity, that is exactly what is sort of taking place. But let me just say, if we read Surah 4169, and I just want to read a bit of a commentary on that, specifically from the Muslim scholar Zamakhshari. He says the following, specifically on 4169. He says, "And they verily mean by the person of the Father, the being, and by the person of the Son, knowledge, and by the person of the Holy Spirit, life. And this supposes that God is the third of three, or if not, that there are three gods." So we can see that there's sort of a similar understanding within the Quran, where it sort of predicates and makes sort of the assumption that God is one third of this triune God. In the Afrikaans Quran that my friends in South Africa, Muslim friends in South Africa, sent me, it actually insists in 171 of this Quran. It says the following in Afrikaans, and I'll roughly translate it to you. It says that Allah is a enkele God, meaning that the contention that have been made in 171 in this Quran is basically that when Christians assert that there's a biblical doctrine of the Trinity, God by himself is not tritheistic, and the Quran is basically contending not with a specific idea that God is a one Godhead, as Jonathan tried to explain within the park, but he was not allowed to use that phraseology, but that it's basically a tritheistic idea. So let me just say from the very onslaught that when I look at the discussion, the demands that Mansoor is making, for me specifically, violates the central premise of the biblical doctrine of the Trinity. And I could see Jonathan trying to repeat to him, what are you saying? What are you getting at? And I think it's a bit disingenuous to sort of assume that Jonathan is trying to explain the doctrine of the Trinity and God as being, the Father specifically, as being one third of the doctrine of the Trinity in that sense, tritheistically. Let me just also say that yesterday I received a call and I had a prolonged discussion with Ijas Ahmed. Specifically, he's the chap that's got the website Answering Christians, or Calling Christians, sorry. I'm not really on Muslim sites a lot. But, and we spoke about this, and then there was a clip made after that, and some of the words, I didn't know the conversation was recorded, by the way. But there was sort of some words described, and what I'm describing to you now is basically, he sort of edited it in such a way and form that it seems like I'm saying just straight up, Jonathan is wrong, but it's not really, in the half an hour conversation that we had, really what I was getting at. And I just want to read something to you as well, again from my specific Quran Yusuf Ali translation. It speaks on 171, and I just want to leave you with this. He writes the following, and that is Yusuf Ali, and he gives sort of a rendering at the bottom here. You can look at it on page 233. 675 is basically a little footnote at the bottom. He says the following. He says, here the Christian attitude is condemned, which raises Jesus to an equality with God. In some cases, even allows Mary to be venerated, almost to the point of idolatry. Again, I just want to give it sort of as a side note that we do not reiterate basically the understanding that there are three separate gods, nor do we say that Mary, Jesus, and God is the biblical doctrine of the Trinity. But the Quran does, which is basically an assertion in itself. So if you look at commentaries like the Jarrah Layan, you can have a look at, I think it's volume 1, page 278. It speaks specifically of Jesus, Allah, and Mary being three distinct gods, by the way. But here's the point. When I look at what Jonathan is trying to say, Jonathan is basically saying the following. He says, to say that each individual person of the Trinity is God in their own right would lead to an understanding and an affirmation of what the Quran is basically saying about the biblical doctrine of the Trinity, which leads to tritheism. But we need to note, and I think Jonathan is trying to get at this, that each person in the Trinity is sort of fully and completely the divine essence, but all the qualities cannot be divided, sort of, because God is a qualitative infinite. And I was actually quite amazed, and I saw that in fact Mansoor demands from Jonathan, if you watch the clip, to get to this conclusion, which is just an absolute base rate fallacy in logic that is spoken of. And the base rate fallacy is simply this. It makes a probable judgment without sort of taking into account previous or prior sort of probabilities. And let me just give you a few prior probabilities that Jonathan tried to lay down when he spoke, but it was sort of disallowed and dissed. Because EJS basically uses my friend Dr. James White's book, let me just give you three sort of basic previous prior probabilities that I think Jonathan tried to establish, which was disallowed and created a lot of confusion. Number one, when we speak, and EJS also quotes from this, I'm going to quote exactly from the same source than what he does. First, we need to understand that the doctrine of the Trinity rests completely on the truth in the first clause that there is only one God. We can go into that, but secondly, the second sort of prior probability or premise that is laid down is that the definition insists that there are three divine persons. And note immediately that we are not saying there are three divine beings that are one being, or three persons that are one person. That is not what we are saying. That's the second prior probability that Jonathan tried to lay out. And thirdly, we are told that the relationship amongst these divine persons is eternal. They have eternally existent and is unique in relationship. The Father is not 1/3 of God. The Son is not 1/3 of God. The Spirit is not 1/3 of God. There was never a time when the Father was not the Father, never a time when the Son was not the Son, and never a time when the Spirit was not the Spirit. Now, this is what we call, in logic, basically a prior probability that was laid down. And we just see here that prior probability is totally violated from Mansoor, from the very onslaught, by demanding from Jonathan to basically agree with the probabilities that he lays out, which is not what we believe. And I think Jonathan is trying to articulate, okay, you are saying that there's sort of, that God is a 1/3, of sort of the central being, the Father is 1/3 of the central being of this one God, which is absolutely obscure. But let me just say as well that when I looked at the explanation that was given and the demands that were made on Jonathan, I think personally I wouldn't enjoy it, and I take my hats off to people that engage in such a format or fashion. I'm a monochronic and I'm a central thinker, so I would like to speak to one person directly and try to understand what they're saying, which was not allowed in the conversation according to myself. And it's pretty overwhelming, and you can see, and I've said it, you can see Jonathan is flustered because this one is asking, that one is asking. He's answering the question over and over, and they just ask the same question after he's given numerous explanations, which could be quite frustrating. But let me just say that we've had a prolonged sort of discussion yesterday, me and EJaz, and he's only sort of published sort of a short clip, and I've asked for the full clip to be sent to me so I can put it in context. I'll edit everything that is personal, but as for the conversation between me and EJ as to what Jonathan surmised or said, I never straightly or bluntly or straightforwardly out said, I never said straight out that, you know what, Jonathan is a heretic. You know, I just don't think that is what I've tried to communicate. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this clip. Please let me know, and let's see, maybe EJ sends me the clip and I don't have to sort of explain so much, and I can just sort of put up the clip on YouTube, and we can take it from there. Have a wonderful day.